Hello, this is Zack Semke with Passive House Accelerator, and thanks for tuning in to this special episode of the Passive House Podcast. We'll be talking about Reimagine Buildings 24, our 24-hour, around-the-world global online conference. Today, I'll be speaking with Shefali Sanghvi of Dattner Architects, who's a featured speaker at Reimagine Buildings 24. Welcome back to the Passive House Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be back. I always enjoy our chats.
Yes, likewise. And this is a special episode of the show in the run-up to our big Reimagine Buildings 24 online global conference. But before we and I mean, you've been on the show before. We've featured you and the 425 Grand Concourse project on the Reimagine Buildings YouTube channel. So I think people know you, but if you wouldn't mind just starting with a quick introduction of yourself and your role at Dattner, your work, that would be really great.
Sure. So I'm Shefali Sanghvi. I am the Director of Sustainability at Dattner Architects and also a Senior Associate in our housing studio. And so my sort of interest in architecture really stemmed from an interest in affordable housing. This idea that regardless of your income level or your circumstance, everyone deserves sort of like a safe, healthy, reliable place to live. And I think that it really segued really naturally into this interest in sustainability, because how can you talk about affordable housing without talking about sustainability? And as I'm saying this, I'm like, this is exactly the conversation we had the last time we talked about. But I think it's important to reinforce that message.
Absolutely.
And so I've been really fortunate to work at places that really fostered my interest in sustainability. And about 7 years ago, I started working at Dattner, and sustainability has been a big part of Dattner's ethos since the firm's inception. And so in 2022-ish, they decided that the commitment to sustainability was important to formalize, and they created the Director of Sustainability role and sort of promoted me into that position. And it's been really great. It's been really great to continue my sort of passion for affordable housing, and also in the same time pushing forward my passion for sustainability and how it impacts all the typologies that our office works on, whether it's infrastructure projects or schools or basically anything, and to sort of make sure that we are all talking about sustainability the same way. We have this shared vision, and that we're all really looking at sustainability rather holistically, that we're looking at not only energy efficiency, but also materials, impact to users and occupants, like, end of life, environmental justice issues, and things like that. And so that's been really exciting to have that kind of conversation with not only colleagues that may not be into it, or as aware of it, but also clients and contractors and consultants and kind of everyone that we touch as architects.
Yeah. Yeah. And for folks who, I think a lot of people know this, but Dattner is a leader in passive house design and construction. And I was teasing your colleague, John Wolfling, at the FIASCON conference in Houston after the awards ceremony, because he was getting his steps in, going up and accepting awards on behalf of your office. So it's a great place to be, and they're lucky to have you as in the role that you're playing there.
Yeah, I feel glad to be here.
Yeah. So when we were thinking about Reimagine, this crazy conference we're doing, you were one of the first people we thought of as joining us as a speaker. So we're super excited that you're going to be speaking on the conference, and we'll tease a little bit, I think, about that later in our conversation. But you'll be kind of the closing, one of the closing hitters on the last hour of the conference, which is going to be awesome. But we have this theme, Reimagine Buildings, and if you wouldn't mind just reflecting on what does reimagining buildings mean to you? I mean, or why do you think we need to reimagine buildings?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say that, I feel really honored that you guys thought of me at all to be part of this really fantastic conference that you guys are putting on. I don't know of another 24-hour conference that is really just focused on sustainability issues, specifically Passive House. And so I'm I think it's going to be really exciting. I'm really glad that this 24-hour format allows us to talk to people outside of the US market because sometimes it feels like we're just speaking in a vacuum, right? Or speaking to
Yeah.
people who are very like-minded. And so to have that more global reach is really, I think it's going to be really great. And I can't wait to hear feedback on this. And
Yeah.
then maybe this
Yeah.
is like an annual thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
And to be in that closing slot, if anyone is listening for 24 hours straight, I hope they stay awake for the last
That's
24th
right.
hour. But yeah, this idea of reimagining buildings, it's something that I feel is really important is this idea that, like, for so long when we talked about sustainability, we really talked about energy efficiency. It's so easy to talk about it from that point of view because it was a tangible benefit, right? You can talk to clients or owners or operators about how it would reduce their heating bills or their hot water bills. Using energy efficiency as the crux of the argument, you can start slowly talking about how the building envelope impacts that, and how building tightness impacts indoor health, and why ventilation is really important, and all these things. But I think that there is this larger discussion around buildings that need to happen that look at sustainability and resiliency as part of sustainability more holistically. That, how can we as practitioners address like longstanding issues around social equity and climate justice? How can we address the fact that, like, we may not have control, especially in the world of affordable housing, we may not necessarily have control over where the projects are built, but we do have control over how we respond to kind of like what's the best way to say this? Sort of like the not ideal parts of the site, right? Like, we're in a flood zone. Like, I didn't choose a site in a flood zone, but here we are. These are one of the last few
Mhm.
parcels left, especially when we talk about affordable housing in New York City. And I think this idea that, like, we are part of a community. How are we engaging with the community? Are we setting a good example for projects that come after us? And to be able to say that, like, we did this as an affordable housing project, so why can't you as a market rate project down the street? And I think that, like, this idea for me, really, it's this: when we talk about reimagining, it's really reimagining how we define sustainability to be very holistic, so that it's sustainability, it's resiliency, it's health, it's embodied carbon, it's equity issues. It just, you can't, it's sustainability is more than energy efficiency. That ship has sailed. We can't really just only talk about energy efficiency when we talk about buildings.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I think one of the things also that I think is coming through as we kind of all of us learn more about those different elements of sustainability, is that there are many ways in which they are actually self-reinforcing, or not mutually reinforcing, not self-reinforcing, but mutually reinforcing. And I think that, so I'm looking forward to some of that conversation coming to the fore, particularly around, like, say, embodied carbon, operational carbon. I think there might be a tendency I think in the initial kind of issue raising about embodied carbon, maybe there was a sense that there was, like, you have to choose one or the other, but they're actually they in so many cases they can be in harmony. And I think that's also true when we look at things like the housing crisis and the climate crisis. And it seems your work, I think, is like right there in that kind of nexus between in solution making around both of those things.
Yeah, and I think, like, we talk about greenhouse gas emissions, and we talk about buildings having such a big role in that, but that looking at it just from, we often talk about it from an operational carbon point of view,
Mm-hmm.
but embodied carbon over the life of the building is also very important. And this, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And it's more
Yeah.
than just like, oh, it's not saying that, oh, I can't do steel and concrete anymore and I can only do mass timber. It's all about making conscious decisions about procurement, and really just looking at what kind of options are available to you based on your site location, because it is kind of on a case by case basis. And it doesn't necessarily, if we think about this as steps towards a common goal, it doesn't mean that the next building you build has to be completely different than anything you've done before. It's really just about being aware and making the right decisions moving forward. And yeah, I mean, I often say that it's like you can't talk about operational carbon and ignore embodied carbon, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all carbon, and you have to pay
Right.
attention to both of them. And I think that the work that Dattner does is kind of helps reinforce that, right? A lot of the things that we do works within the existing construction practices of the typology that we do. Like we do passive house buildings with block and plan construction. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to automatically be cast in place or anything like that. I mean, we've done that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. We can work within the framework that exists that people are used to, then we can start talking about incremental cost increases, and it kind of like brings more people to the table because you're not changing everything all at once.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it's what they say is like you catch more bees with honey than whatever, and it's like
Yeah.
that's kind of
Right.
the feeling here is that if we think about all of us being part of the solution, then we have to figure out a way to work together towards this common good
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
common benefit, really.
Right. I think you've already started to address this, but so we talked about a little bit. What does reimagining buildings mean to you? Why reimagine buildings? But also, how are you reimagining buildings? And I think this probably goes in a little bit into the teaser about some of the stuff you'll share at the conference.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the thing that I've been really focused on this year, and I don't know why I have different focuses every year, but one of the things that I've been really focused on this year is this idea that your ability to be resilient to climate change really kind of is impacted by historical lack of equity. So, like areas that have traditionally been redlined um, may not be well suited to be resilient to climate change, especially if we think about climate change as more than just storm surge, right? We talk about the wildfires that happened last year. Like, who would have ever thought that New York City would be dealing with wildfire smoke? Talking about extreme heat. We talk about resiliency against storm surge and flash flooding. And it kind of feels like when you look at these things and you look at Passive House, it's like, yeah, Passive House really addresses a lot of these things, even if it was not the original intention. Like it gets us to where we need to be able to have this idea of survivability to all types of climate change. And when we talk about that in like the under the umbrella of affordable housing, it's like such a no-brainer. It's such a no-brainer that you can answer owners like bottom line concerns and also provide a healthier building that is resilient to a variety of climate change. And as I think the years pass, we're going to see more and more things that we just were not expecting ever. I mean, I've been doing this for 18 or so years. So there are many people who've been doing this for much longer than me. But even for me, these last few years, I've been like, this is not stuff that I was prepared to design for, but this is the
Yeah.
reality in which we live.
Yeah. Yeah, well, in Seattle, where I live, we had that heat dome a couple of years ago. It also hit Portland, and it was just in British Columbia. It was just totally insane. I mean, just like temperatures unheard of, and the mapping of where the temperatures in Seattle and also in Portland, the mapping of where those were high, the temperatures were highest, corresponded pretty perfectly to the maps of the redlined neighborhoods. And a lot of that had to do with the lack of urban forestry or
Right.
of trees on the streets. Simple like things like that have just because of that lack of equity and kind of disinvestment. Have resulted in that. So there are just so many ways that kind of manifest that are surprising. I think.
Yeah, and I think like sometimes as architects we're like, well, there's only so much we can do. But which is true to a certain extent. Like, we're not urban planners, we're not, and many of us don't have the ability to impact policy, although we all have that opportunity to by being more involved in local government. But it doesn't mean that we can't do anything, right? I mean, even if we're just
Yeah,
looking
no
at
kidding.
our one site, we also have to pay attention to how that site can like better the community in which it's built, and what are we doing on our one site to mitigate some of these things that we otherwise have no control over.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that there is I think that message of capacity and just some, there is some power that this industry does have, we're really, I think that is super encouraging. And one of the things I think that will be great about your presentation, because you'll be illustrating an example of that. Could you tease a little bit about the project that you're going to be referring to in your talk?
Yeah, sure. The project is a 26-acre master plan, which is kind of unique in New York City to think about master planning at that scale. But it is an all affordable project with, some retail community facility, potentially a school, its own sort of like waste management plan. So it's really and it's built 100% in a floodplain. So it's really kind of exciting to think about how we are looking at this, not just from a building point of view, but an infrastructure point of view, not only like sort of stormwater and that kind of infrastructure, but also waste management, and how we're connected to like parks and parking, and what's the border that we are presenting to the existing community. And so I think that even though it's a unique project in its scale, I think that this idea of master planning is not so unique when you get outside of dense urban areas. And so I think it would be a really interesting project for a lot of the people who will be attending this conference to hear about. And maybe there are lessons that could be learned, or at least concepts that can be applied to other sorts of projects. I don't want to, I could tell you the project name, but I'm like, don't Google it and
Yeah, that's right. No. We need to keep it secret.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And so this is going to be during hour 24 of our 24-hour conference, which hits at 11 a.m. Eastern on March 8th. That's a Friday, March 8th. And so if you want to stay up all night with us and do the 24 hours, that's awesome. But I think the majority of folks will be taking in the conference during their waking hours, and that works great. So there will be, we start at noon on Thursday, noon Eastern on Thursday, and end at noon Eastern on Friday. So, Shefali, thank you so much, and we're so excited to have you as a presenter on the conference, and for taking the time out to share with us today.
Of course. Thanks again for thinking of me and for having me. I'm really excited to talk about our project, and I'm really excited for this conference, and it feels like there should be a special gold star for anyone who attends all 24 hours.
Definitely. We're working on it. We're working on it. We're going to do some gamification around that for sure. Definitely. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks for tuning in to this special episode of the Passive House podcast, featuring some upcoming guests for our Reimagine Buildings 24, happening on March 7th and 8th. Reimagine Buildings is a global online conference that will provide information, connections, and inspiration to make buildings that can change the world. Over the course of 24 hours, we'll circumnavigate the globe, unveiling a new innovative building project every hour, complete with actionable solutions and lessons from around the world. Also earn AIA credits. RB24 live program sessions will be submitted for AIA CEs in partnership with AIA New York State. And for students, check out our scholarships and special student discounts. Many thanks to NYSERDA for being the stakeholder sponsor of RB24. Register now for Reimagine Buildings 24 and use the promo code PODCAST for a 20% discount.